IUL doesn't lose a dime due to market crashes. In this educational episode, I'm going to address the question, how did IUL perform during the 2001 and also 2002-2003 market downturn after 9/11 and 2008 market crash because of the mortgage meltdown? You're going to be blown away when you see how IUL doubled and even tripled people's money when most Americans were barely getting back to break even. So I'm Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist now for just about 5 decades, helping thousands of people prepare for a comfortable retirement. And the biggest reason why most retirees outlive their money is because of the negative impact of taxes, inflation, and market volatility. So if you've watched very many episodes on this channel, you'll know that my favorite financial instrument that allows one to accumulate their money tax-free and then be able to access money tax-free their entire retirement years if they live to be 120 without depleting principal. And at the end of the day, when they die, it blossoms and transfers tax-free, is a max-funded indexed universal life insurance contract, but it must be structured correctly and funded properly. So many times people say, well, okay, I'm interested in one of these, but how did they fare during these market crashes where the market crashed 40%? And I'll go, oh, I'm glad you asked. So first of all, let's make sure you understand how indexed universal life works. Sometimes people have this misconception that your money's in a life insurance policy and you're telling the insurance company to invest it in an index mutual fund. That's what people like Dave Ramsey and his team think. No, they don't know what they don't know. When you have cash value inside of that insurance policy, that money has to stay safe in the insurance company, earning the general account portfolio rate. So let's say that a particular point in time, you've got $1 million of cash value. Now, this is just an example. It doesn't matter if you have 10,000, 100,000, 10 million, but this is easy to extrapolate from. So let's say you have $1 million of cash value in your IUL policy. And that year, you feel bearish about America. You think we're headed for a recession. Well, if I were you, I would just settle for the general account portfolio. Now, out of most decades, you'll have 7 gain years compared to 3 loss years. And sometimes people just go ahead and link to an index and they don't worry about the 30% of the time the market goes down. But the decade we're talking about, 2000 to 2010, there were 5 years the market lost and 5 years the market went up. And yet people who owned indexed universal life without diversifying, without rebalancing, doubled their money from 2000 to 2010 when most Americans were still down about 38%. It took until 2012 to come back to break even, as I'm going to show you. But if you feel bearish about America, just settle for the general account portfolio rate. Now, back in the 1980s up until the early 90s, the general account portfolio rate of insurance companies were 11 to 15%. I never got credited less than 11.75% on my universal life policies from 1980 to 1992, 93. But then interest rates started to come down. So in 1997, indexing came out because I didn't want to put my money in a variable life insurance policy. Then your money is out exposed in that market volatility. See, I had 3,000 clients in the 1970s invested in mutual funds. They were never happier than when I got them out of that volatile market. So if I have $1 million in there, I can just settle for, let's say, 4%. Right now, general account portfolio rates on most insurance company portfolios, this is where they have millions and trillions of dollars that they're investing in AAA and AA bonds, mortgages on shopping malls and skyscrapers and so forth, very little going to stocks. And this is where they earn a general account portfolio rate. So right now, we've been in a low interest environment for several years. So it might be 5%. Well, the insurance company's in business to make money, so they usually need one of those percentage points to cover their costs. And so the net might be 4. So you could just settle for $40,000 tax-free. At the end of the year, you have $1,040,000, and it will keep compounding, okay? But any year you feel bullish about America, you can link to an index of your choice. So there's lots of indexes. These are like measuring tapes, and this measures how the growth is taking place in the market. So you have the S&P 500 index, you have the Dow Jones, you have the Russell 2000, you have the Barclays U.S. Dynamic Balance Index. And so you have all these indices, and a good IUL agent will diversify you. I'm going to simplify and just use the S&P, which is one of the most common ones. So if you want to link to the S&P 500 in a given year, then you're saying this $40,000 of interest that I'm earning on my million, I'm willing to relinquish that interest, but don't you dare put my million in the market. So the insurance company takes the interest on your million, in this case, 40 grand, and they fund an options budget. And with that, they buy upside options in the S&P 500. And then if the S&P goes up 8%, they credit you $80,000. If it goes up 12%, they credit you $120,000 because, people say, well, how can the insurance company afford to do that? You don't understand options. Options will double and triple in value. But if the market crashes, you have given up the $40,000, but your million is still safe. Zero becomes your hero. You don't lose any of your principal. And so why do you do that? Because 70% of the time, the market's going to be up. But let's use the worst period since the Great Depression and show you what happens. See, the remaining money in your policy grows back up to the $1 million of cash value. And so that's why you don't make anything maybe in a down year, but you don't lose. Now, I'm simplifying this because sometimes when the market goes down, you can position yourself to make a lot of money by converting to a one-year point-to-point with no cap. And many of our IUL professionals told their clients in March of 2020, because of the 30% drop in the market due to COVID-19, to link to a one-year point-to-point with no cap. Well, there's a 5% charge when you do that. So if the market only went up 12, you'd only net 7. So you normally don't choose that one except when the market crashes. Well, a lot of those weren't around back in the worst decade since the Great Depression. But in 2020, they were, and many of our IUL producers told their clients to link. And a year later, the market was up 66.33%, minus 5%. They netted 61.33% credit on their policies. We had a client that had $852,000 in his IUL policy in March of 2020. He didn't add a dime to that account, and he made over $535,000 tax-free in 1 year. His account value was $1,387,000 1 year later. Now, let's not even talk about those kinds of strategies. Let's talk about how an IUL policy performs if you never even do rebalance. So let's take this period of 2008. It happened right here. The year before, in 2007, the market barely went up. If you started out with $500,000, it would probably go up about 2.43% in 2007, just before it was ready to fall apart. And then in 2008, most people lost 38.5% if they had their money in the market. If they had $1 million in there, it was down to about 620,000. So 500,000 would only be worth 314,000 in 2008. And then the next year, the market went up 23.45, but they're only up to 388,000 now. 12.78, they're up to 438. Zero this year. And then in 2012, 29% in the market, but you're not even back up to break even at 500,000. That's money in the market during that horrible period where 2008 started out. So you're not even back to break even. People who owned indexed universal life, even without rebalancing, that $500,000, they may not have made anything in 2008, but they didn't lose. They still kept their 512,000. And then they capped out. I'm going to put a cap here of 10.5%. In actuality, our clients capped out in 2009 at 16%. That's what the caps were back then. Many of our clients locked in gains the first 90 days of 2009 at 16%. I'm being super conservative here. I'm only showing 10 and a half, 0, 10 and a half. And your $500,000 would be worth $691,000, even if you were capped at 10.5%. Our clients, during that time period, they doubled their money. Okay, their $500,000 was worth $1 million instead of $691 because we rebalance and we use the indexing choices that allowed them to do that. So they fared extremely well. Well, let's go back to the 2001 period. That was the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So in November of 1999, let's say that you were a baby boomer and you had accumulated $1 million and you were ready to retire. Well, most of them had to put off retirement 7 years. They felt like they had lost their future because after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the market went down, at least 35% down. That $1 million was only worth about $600,000. It took 4 years to come back to where you finally had your million again. Now, during that 7-year period, what happened? When people had their money in Indexed Universal Life, many people were earning, without rebalancing, 7.23% average. Rule of 72, their money would double to $1 million at the end of 10 years. This would be over here in 2010. What happened in 2008, though? These people who put off retirement 7 years thought they could finally retire. And then, as Warren Buffett put it, he said when the tide went out in 2008, it revealed who was swimming naked. Well, people weren't protected. They lost 30, 40, 50% again for the second time in a decade. And it took until 2012, November of 2012, to finally have $1,046,800 for the million you started with. That's why we call it the lost decade. It was actually 12 years. People who owned Indexed Universal Life, when it went down, they did not lose. They maybe didn't earn anything, 0, 0, 0, and then 0, 0, because there were 5 down years. But the other years, they only capped out twice. But at the end of 12 years, $1 million would have grown to $2.5 million, with rebalancing at least $3 million. What's rebalancing? Let me just give you a simple example. See, our clients didn't have 0, 5 of those down years, because we looked at it and we go, oh, look at all of this. People are still not going out and eating at restaurants or flying because of 9/11. They're still rubbernecking on the economic freeway, so to speak. And so they only got 0 1 year. In 2002 and 2003, they just moved back over and earned the general account portfolio rate, which back then was a net of 5%. So they earned 5% instead of 0. And then the same thing happened in 2007. When this happened in 2007, they only earned 2.76. But when this crash happened, we could see it. And so they moved back over and earned 5%. So they only earned those nominal rates of return 2 of those 12 years because we rebalanced and moved the money back over to the general account portfolio. So when you do that, I have been able to average 11.17% gross, but I can net 10.07 at the end of the day, retroactive back to day one, when you go through these types of downturns. Now, if you think that recessions are a thing of the past, it's just a phenomenon, you better wake up. We're headed for more recessions, and I want to protect you. You do that by linking your returns to the market, so when it goes up, you benefit. But when it goes down, you just stay up here, or you stay up here, or you just settle for 4 or 5% instead of losing 40%. Does that make sense? So when you superimpose that worst 12-year period right here on this graph, and then you calculate that, that's a pathetic 1/3% compounded rate of return. That's unacceptable to me. When you use just Indexed Universal Life, and this one wasn't rebalancing, you may not make much of anything during those down years, but you don't lose, okay? But at the end of the day, you would have had 130% return over the 12-year periods instead of a measly 4.68%. This is incredible. So if you want to learn how to protect yourself when the market crashes, then you need to make sure you understand how you don't lose a dime due to a market crash. If you want to learn this, I would recommend you study. This is my 11th book. It's called The Laser Fund. It's 2 books in 1. I'm going to gift you a copy of this. I'll show you how to claim your free copy. But this is 2 books in 1 because this side is about 14 chapters with all the charts and graphs and explanations for the left brain learner. If you're a right brain learner, you can flip it over and read this one. This is about 100 pages, 12 chapters with 62 actual client stories of how it works in real life for all kinds of financial goals. If you want to use both your left brain and your right brain, I would recommend you read the whole book. Now, if you go to Amazon, it retails for $20. You spend another $10 on shipping and handling. If you do that, thank you. But I'll tell you what, I'll gift you a copy free. You simply go to laserfund.com or click on the link below. You contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I require some skin in the game, and I'll pay for the book. I'll fire out a hard copy to you. And while you're in there, if you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's options there for audio and video formats. And also check out the educational webinars we teach on a regular basis. They're free. You can even schedule an appointment, fill your name in an appointment slot with one of the few IUL specialists that I trust, that I oversee, that will show you how it may work in your particular set of circumstances. But the message here is do not lose money during the next market crash. Seriously consider setting up an IUL correctly.